I'm Leanne Tran, psychologist who's worked with families whose kids don't fit the mould for almost 20 years. I've worked with children for decades, but I know parents are the real change makers when it comes to their kids. Having 3 kids of my own means I know it's not easy. Parent Like a Psychologist is all about simplifying how you support your kids with psychology information filtered through years of experience to take you from overwhelmed to confident. Come on in. So welcome everyone to another episode of Parent Like a Psychologist. This one's really exciting because I have the awesome Shona Gates here with me. Welcome, Shona.
Hi, I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I am too. It's and so to give a little bit of context, I guess I'm you are one of my guests who has experienced neurodivergence yourself, but you also have the experience of having kids who are neurodivergent. So you can kind of speak to both the experience of growing up with ADHD and also of parenting. So you've got kind of the double whammy of experience, I think, lived experience, I should say.
Definitely lived experience, yeah.
Mm. And so I wonder if you could spend more than 60 seconds, if you want to, telling us about you and what you're doing with your life right now.
Great. So here is a 3-hour background on every bit of information no one asked for. No, I'm kidding. I struggle with the what do you do question. I think because
Yeah.
I do a lot, and that obviously becomes obvious once you know about my diagnosis. But yeah, I guess in a nutshell, I'm Shona. I have 3 kids. I live in the Barossa Valley in South Australia. I currently run 2 businesses, and I'm also helping my husband grow his third business. I'm obviously a business advisor and consultant. I'm an author and I also run a graphic design brand as well. So I like to stay busy.
I think that's a fair statement, if not understatement. Yeah, because in addition to all of those things, you're parenting 3 kids as well. It's a
It's
lot.
a lot. It's pretty chaotic. I think people freak out when they see our calendar, and from the outside, our world looks pretty intense. Um,
Mm,
but it does just work for us. I think we're
mm,
as collectively as a family, if we have nothing planned on the weekend and we're just having a whole open day with nothing to do, we all actually get quite uncomfortable and then we don't like it. Where everyone gets really grumpy and frustrated. So we thrive in the chaos of it all.
yeah. So you mentioned that from the outside it looks a little bit chaotic, but what does it feel like from the inside to be busy like that?
I feel like we've accepted now that it works better when we're busy.
Hmm.
Have sometimes, I think on average, it's between 9 to 15 therapy appointments every fortnight.
Hmm.
So that's obviously a lot. I think some of those it's actually condensed in one week. So sometimes we can even have 9 to 15 appointments in one week. It's a lot.
Right.
And then you've got running 3 businesses on top of that, and then just normal basketball, kids' activities, remembering to buy bread and milk, running our businesses in between all that. It looks pretty intense from the outside, but from the inside, we're actually, I think, coping better than a lot of other families would with that level of activity. And I think it's the structure that we give to it that
Mm,
it feels good. I don't know, it kind of really works for our family.
mm.
Yeah.
It sounds like, yeah, it sounded to me like you probably have a good structure, but you've also got the knowledge of um, you as a family in terms of what you need to feel calm and good and what others need to feel calm and good as well. And so for some people, it's lots of downtime, but for you guys, it sounds like it's more occupation and
Yeah.
um, productivity.
I think we definitely noticed early on, once we started to have that distinction between school term and school holidays, that the kids
Hmm.
were really struggling with school holidays because they were so open-ended. It was that kind of, when you give a child a blank page, and some kids love the blank page because they can create anything. And then I've got kids that don't want to mess up the blank page because they don't know, and can you give them an idea, or they prefer to color in a colored page,
Yeah.
not just look at a blank page. So we figured out really quickly that school holidays were sending me insane and the kids insane because of that lack of structure. And so the next school holidays, I implemented a lot more structure into it and realized we all felt a lot better. They thrived in it. We've kind of figured out our own format. And that was really when we had to take the traditional advice and just throw it out the window and really go, we'll just figure out what works for our family and then never kind
Mm,
of apologize for it moving
yeah.
forward.
I'd love to hear more about how you do the structure and how it works for you, but also what advice did you just chuck out?
I think it was one piece of advice I got really early on from and I do mean very early on, from our pediatrician with my son. I was 38 weeks pregnant, sitting in the pediatric appointment that we've waited 12 months for. Our 2-year-old son, Eric, was crawling around on the floor lining up trains. And that was the first time we heard the word autism, really. The pediatrician dropped the what we affectionately refer to as the A bomb on us.
Okay.
Because I pretty much got the A bomb dropped and then I went straight into labor with my
Oh,
daughter. And the best piece of advice he ever gave us was don't Google anything. Don't
right.
start going into research mode because I think he could tell I'm a big researcher and I love it and data collector. Not autistic at all, am I? So he quickly flagged that and he just went, don't Google it, just go home. And I basically want you to just understand his brain works differently and figure out how to work with his brain. And so I took that as kind of a lifeline, like don't Google it. No matter what's going on, don't Google it, don't Google it, don't Google it.
Hmm.
And that I think allowed us to not have, I guess, other people's limitations or perceptions on what that journey was meant to look like. And we really
Yeah.
just decided that we had to figure it out for ourselves. Yeah, and that there's some things that I guess traditionally make autistic kids more comfortable or kids with ADHD are actually the direct opposite for our kids. You know, they need
Hmm.
a lot of downtime, whereas my son Eric needs so much heavy work. He pretty much needs to do a 15-kilometer run every day after school just to regulate. It's just understanding that there's no such thing as wrong ways to do
Hmm.
this. It's just that there is different ways for everyone to do it. Yeah, and that's I guess our little family philosophy on it.
Yeah, that's awesome. It sounds like you're kind of do it in a quite intuitive way of working out what each child needs and trying to put that into their schedule as well, rather than the advice or the shoulds from Google.
Oh, it's much more exhausting this way. I think it would probably have been easier long term for my own mental health if I just went, nope, you all get 20 minutes in a sensory swing after school, and that's what you all need, and that's what we're doing. Trying to balance all of their, I guess, regulation needs and sensory needs and then food needs and all that. It is a lot mentally, but I'd probably be
Mm,
very bored without it all now.
right. Yeah. I think the thing is too, you're kind of assuming that the whatever the cookie cutter approach is online would have worked straight away. And that's not my experience with families, that it doesn't work for all kids in the family. Often kids have competing needs. And so, yeah, it's never quite as simple as it seems when people give that general advice.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you mentioned some things that you struggle with in your family, like you mentioned the therapy appointments already, but sometimes the food aversion, sorry, and pathological demand avoidance and that kind of thing. Do you have any go-to tips for how to manage that? Or
Oh,
do you?
we are still navigating that. I think because as well, I've got a 13-year-old, almost 13-year
Mhm.
old, a 10-year-old, and a nearly 5-year-old. So it feels
Mm,
like every time we move through another phase and figure out something that works for, let's say, the 10-year-old in the transition that she's in, it's like, oh, great, we've conquered that one little thing. And now my 5-year-old will move into something else. And so it's just
yeah.
constant adjustment. I don't think there is any one tip that I could say, do this one thing and it'll work for everyone. We are actively in feeding therapy for the
Hmm.
food aversion stuff, learning a lot about that at the moment with our 5-year-olds in feeding therapy. And with the work that we're doing in there is helping the 10-year-old and helping the 13-year-old and helping my 34-year-old
Right.
year old husband with all
Okay.
of his food stuff and food trauma, and myself with 20 years of eating disorder that was actually ADHD. So we're learning a lot all the time. It is a constant evolution, I think, of going, what worked before might not work now. The pathological demand avoidance, I have found the best thing for my kids has been, I know everyone says like, you've got to make it fun, you've got to make it a great experience, you've got to kind of like, stop and really make it engaging and novel for them.
Hmm.
And I think that that is great advice and that does work. I see it all the time. I'm really great at doing that with my nieces and nephews. Some of them are also
Hmm.
neurodivergent as well and can be very calm and be like, you don't want to get in the pram. Great, let's see if we can create a game out of it. But
Yeah,
with my kids, we're so busy and they're often feeding off of each other's stuff that what has actually worked the best for us is a very much clear, logical, down the line. I know you
right.
don't want to do this. The consequence of not doing this is that. So you need to do this and not leaving room for negotiation or options, which I know is
Hmm.
like almost the worst thing for someone with pathological demand avoidance. Um, but then there's going to be situations I know where or my kids will just, sorry, the dog's snoring underneath my desk. Um, they'll just be contrary on purpose. And
Mm,
there's some times where they can do that in a safe space or a safe scenario, but there are some times when you can't decide you want to run around in a car park full of cars because I won't take 10 minutes to make it fun for you to get in the car.
hmm.
Sometimes you just need to behave safely. So we've almost had to figure that out and
Mm,
try different things because I don't always have time, capacity, or a safe environment to do the let's make it fun situation. So
yeah,
does that make
yeah.
sense? Did that any of that even make sense?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think it really does. And I think it shows that there's not always one right approach. And I hear what you're saying about making it fun and making it a choice and that kind of thing. But you're right that there's not always it's not right for every situation. But I also think it depends on the underlying reason of why kids are doing what they're doing. And like you said, sometimes it's just to be contrary, or sometimes it's based on anxiety as well. And
Yeah,
being really clear with no wriggle room and no negotiation is great for anxious based behavior. So again, yeah, depends
yeah.
on the child, the
It's
situation.
very different for the different kids. And also, I think we're in another phase with our eldest where we're going, what is the disability? What is that pathological demand avoidance? And what is sensory needs? And what is just him being a teenager and just really not a
Yeah.
nice person sometimes?
Yeah.
Um, and I'm constantly saying to our therapist at the moment, like, is there a checklist? I need some way of telling what's the disability where I have to have a bit of grace and what's the teenager in him where I have to be a little bit firmer. She's like, yeah, I wish that existed. So,
Yeah. Don't said every parent ever as well, I reckon. Yeah. And so what have been the most helpful resources or strategies for your family?
we've obviously had access to a lot of therapy, which has made a massive difference. We were one of the first, I think, 6 families on the NDIS scheme when it got introduced here in South Australia. And that was really, really good. It was a very different experience like 10 years ago to what it is today.
Hmm.
So we had access to a lot of early intervention support for my eldest son, which was great. He went from completely nonverbal and just no one at home most of the time to now a thriving kid in mainstream high school winning awards.
Hmm.
So I've got to like props to therapy because that has probably been the biggest coping and strategy. And even I had a conversation with my daughter yesterday where she was feeling she's overstimulated, overwhelmed. We had a couple of too many things on over the weekend. And she's like, oh, I need to speak to Brianna, my occupational therapist, about this because my wave of up and down regulation is all over the place. Probably not normal for a 10-year-old to speak like that, but the fact that she can actively be like, I need to reconnect with this therapist, that they have a broader support network is probably the biggest tool or resource. It's not necessarily a chart or a system or a process, but just having that support network outside of just my husband and me of people that they
Mm,
can connect with and talk about this type of stuff. Oftentimes something will happen, at school or a conversation. And it'll be like, great. So now we know exactly what to bring up in your next behavior therapy session, your next play therapy session. And the kids will come up and ask me to email ahead of time. So in case because they know they forget stuff, this has happened. Can
yeah.
you please email ahead so that when they get there for the therapy appointment, they can still kind of address it. So I would say therapy would be the biggest one. When we were younger, sorry, not where we were, well, I was younger too, I guess. When the kids
Yeah.
were younger, We had, they loved each other a lot. They don't anymore. The oldest two absolutely hate each other, but they would share one room, and we took the second bedroom in our very small little house and turned that into a full crash bash playroom. So it was all leftover mattresses and like big cushions, and got the family to just give us all the extra quilts. And it was basically just a massive sensory room for the wet
Mhm.
weather. So that helped a lot. I'm not saying you need like a whole room. These days we don't. We have, we have stuff that gets brought out if you need to do that. And we've
Yeah.
just accepted that our couches are going to be completely trashed and need to be replaced every few years because we've got kids that like a lot of heavy work. What else did we do? It was basically we've I think what we actually did that has made the biggest difference was almost like an element of exposure therapy. I think that would
Hmm.
kind of be the word for it. I don't like this wasn't something that the therapist told us to do or anything like that. It was just basically like, okay, so our son struggles with loud noises and lots of kids. So we did like a play group 3 mornings a week, just a short amount. We were there for like 15 minutes. He would wear
Hmm.
headphones, and eventually we built that up to the point where we were going out every single morning for big social group activities, lots of like music classes and stuff. And then in the afternoon, he could crash and kind of recuperate at home after that. So I think that
Yeah.
that probably was a good strategy as well, looking back. That's been really beneficial because now we've got kids that they know if we're going somewhere loud, chuck the headphones in the bag. If I
Hmm.
need to say, like, we were at the basketball the other day, which is 12,000 people in a stadium, and the 4-year-old's just like, he's got the headphones on. He's like, oh, it's a bit loud right now. There's a lot of yelling. Can I go outside for a little bit? And then we come back
Mm.
in. So it's been that flexibility, I guess, and connection.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know it'd
That's
be lovely to say like a little resource chart or a certain app, wouldn't it? But
no.
it's never the
No, but
answer.
it's not realistic, is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
But what you're describing sounds like a great combination of your kids learning some skills, like that example your daughter gave of her like regulation all over the place is so fantastic for someone to be emotionally aware like that. And so it's giving your kids some skills, but then also you are helping them put those skills into practice in real life situations and building up their tolerance to it so it's not overwhelming because you're taking small steps.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think a conversation we've had a lot of times is, and I'm not sure allowed to say a naughty word on here, but we've got it on our fridge, is that autism isn't your excuse to be an a-hole, is
Yeah.
printed on our fridge. And I think that really comes back to, yes, it would be a great world if everything was very inclusive and diverse and accommodating and accessible, but and then that'll take generations to come. Right now, it's not. And so you need to be the person that's accountable for managing yourself, those expectations, communicating how that's going for you, and letting
Yeah.
other people know, I'm not angry at you. It's very loud and I need a moment, or I need to eat. I've forgotten to eat today. That's why I'm
Yeah.
behaving. There's an element of radical responsibility that I want my kids to have that,
Hmm.
autism's not a problem. It's an amazing thing that gives you great skill, like all this type of stuff, but it's no one else has got that top of priority in the real world.
Yeah.
No one else
Yeah.
is going to kind of care. You have to be the person that manages that. It's exhausting, but that's the way it is.
Yeah. While there's still that mismatch between society expects and the autistic experience. But being able to self-advocate is a really great thing because at the end of the day, I guess we all need to self-advocate for ourselves, obviously self,
Absolutely.
but yeah, it's a great skill to have. Thanks for listening to this episode of Parent Like a Psychologist. If you found it helpful, please share on Instagram so other parents can benefit too, and tag me at Leanne Tran Psychology so that I can say a big thank you. Head over to leannetran.com.au to join the village for bite-sized psychology tips straight to your inbox. I really hope this podcast has brought a new perspective and you a step closer towards a calm parent and a thriving child. Have a delightful day.